Alright, sorry about that, guys. I got the motor propped up in there. Now you can see right there, you know, you got a lot of room from top to bottom, but from side to side, you know, it's kind of close. And I don't know if that really, yeah, that gives you, like, it can rock back and forth. Maybe a quarter, maybe a ½ inch or an inch. So that's pretty much where it's going to be. And I was able to just kind of prop it in there with a stick. Obviously, we got to get eyes on it. We'll have to hook up to that motor mount on that side and make sure it's whatever with the transmission. But if you look at it, it looks better like that. But, and I know you can barely probably see that. It looks better like that, but look at that transmission. It still looks like it needs to go, the front of it needs to go towards the driver's side. So, I mean, you could put it wherever, it really don't matter, but to get a good set of eyes, there you go. See the diff in that oil pan's close, but you got to think, what's it going to torque up? Once it torques up, there you go. Once it torques up, you know, you might have a little bit of a smack sound. Bubble, you know how it is when you got a bad transmission mount, but right there's the best gap that I can give it. And right there, the piece of wood is in between the diff and the oil pan. The thickness of that wood. That's guesstimation now, but I'm thinking that's where it's going to have to be. You know, better look. You know, it could be to the front, to the back, whatever it is, but if we can get that oil, that transmission pan to be what it is, pretty close. And then it looks like it just needs to come over to the driver's side, so we may need to pull the motor over. It's pretty close, but if you look at it, the motor's still kind of slanted. I don't know if you can see that. It still needs to go over, you know. It looks crooked a little bit still, like it's leaning. I don't know, some of the motors lean though. I'm just worried about what the transmission pan is doing and whether or not it needs to be one way or the other. I'm thinking it needs to go that way and it needs to roll a little bit more. It's pretty close. I mean, if you look at it, it's pretty close because it kind of sets to one side. It kind of sets to this side. If you look at it, everything's kind of tight on this side. You know, if you look at the cross member here, you look at the cross member there, you know, it's over further. You just have to get a point of reference. It looks like that cross member's a little bit longer on this side over here. So, it is what it is. And it might be pretty close. You know, it's going to need some fine working, obviously. But that fuel line's right up against it. So that fuel line's right up against the firewall right there. Now we may have to bend them lines over there. You want to be on that side of the motor because you look, your exhaust is right here. And if you was to get an impact or something, it hits on that fuel line and it hits that exhaust or whatever, you know, it'd catch on fire. It'll burn. If you was to get in an accident, maybe. It could burn either way, it don't matter, but, you know, all you really need to do is kind of bend those lines. You know, you could start right here and get them to where they're just kind of right there. So, they're still on there loose. But that bracket's hitting, you know. That's how high we got to be. They ain't no getting around it. So. And then we're going to have to stick that heater box back in there and check it with the heater box and see how far that plate is out. I don't know, we really need to make a dog box for it, just in case. But look at that, to grab a hold of that motor lift point right there, it's pretty tight. So, it is what it is. We'll figure it out from there anyhow. But I'm thinking pretty close to being beautiful. I mean, that gives us, we don't have to cut the oil pan, we don't have to do none of that stupidness. And you know, that'd give you wiggle room. Like when you take and weld those motor mounts in, you're not really going to know nothing until they sit down on the mount. So that might be a little bit high, and you knock that piece of wood out. Once everything settles, you may just have enough room. You know what I mean? This is the process of elimination. The motor plates together, you know, now we can kind of see right there where the motor mount, the shiny piece right here is the motor mount. So it's pretty close to that bolting up to that plate, or welding up to the plate, and then we'll bolt it all together. Who knows what it'll be when you get it all the way together. But we need to know for sure. Right there, I haven't done nothing new now. And right there, I don't know if you can even see it. It's actually below that steering arm right there. See the shiny metal? Below that steering arm is where that motor mount goes in. So it might be a little bit further back than what we're thinking. So you might have to make some kind of different plate or whatever it takes. We got to make it happen. So right now it's almost too high. I mean, everything, it's hitting. It's smashed. Now, if you was try to run that, it's probably going to make a noise. But like I say, once you get the motor mounts welded on, you make sure the transmission's not this or this, and it's not this or this. You know, we're going to get it pretty close, and then we're going to seal the deal by making motor mounts and getting something tacked on there enough to let the motor down and say, okay, now we got something. But it's tight on the transmission tunnel, and it's still pretty tight on that firewall. You know, to grab a hold of, put a chain in there, it's going to get some scabs pulled out. So it's going to be spray painted. You can still get the oil fill out. That's all that matters. And you know, to plug that plug up, you know, it's got some bolts here. You can unplug it, slide it forward, plug it up, and slide it back in there. You know, if you need to change coil packs, you got to do it anyhow. So that plug might be tight, and we still got to put the intake back on it. You know, once you get it to where it's this and this and this and this on the transmission, and you're kind of saying, well, okay, we got room here on the diff and everything, kind of too far back, but I mean, it is what it is. And then we can, one step further is going to be getting the motor mounts tacked in there good enough, see if we can get the intake on it, and then see if we can fit that air box in there. I don't care to cut the air box. Get the air box in there, and hopefully have some type of firewall to go with that. You know, you might have to weld some nuts or bolts from the back, and it goes through and it bolts in or something. You know, however you got to do it. And then we still got our oil fill, and then you got your transmission dipstick too. And all this wiring harness has got to come out. So we got to figure out what it takes to get the wiring harness all the way on out, and just keep picking it apart one day at a time. I'm thinking that's going to be probably pretty close. Most people just say frigate. I'm about to. I want to see this thing running again. But we're kind of taking our time with it, making sure it's going to be, you know, whatever. But once you set that down, you know, they'll probably give you just enough room. Hopefully it don't make a rattle on that diff. There's plenty of room under the diff, but the side to side, when it torques or something, you don't want to hear the oil pan hitting the front diff. So we'll see.